But the small-scale fisheries in Sierra Leone have a very important role. Firstly, 60% of the production in the fisheries sector is from the artisanal sector. And this has implications for export and domestic consumption. And of course, all of this is governed by certain principles that we apply, governance principles. Firstly, we have what's known as the inshore exclusion zone, which is a zone that extends up to 6 nautical miles from the shoreline. And only artisanal fisheries stakeholders are allowed to fish in that area. And we recently declared marine protected areas which protect vulnerable sites, such as the spawning areas of fish and mangrove vegetation. It is important that we do so because there's threat from various areas. The trawlers in the past had made incursions into these areas and threatened the fish stock themselves, and also threatened our artisanal fishermen by destroying their gear, and in some instances, some of them lost their lives. So we have the IEZ, which is exclusively for the artisanal fishermen. And this is monitored by the VMS system that we applied. We have community associations, which are bodies that involve the fisher folks and the fishing communities, which are the ones that manage these marine protected areas. And these are important because we know fish has implications for food security and revenue generation and employment. 90% of the animal protein consumed by our people is from fish, and we contribute 10% to the GDP. The marine protected areas are an important governance tool. It helps us apply the ecosystem approach to fisheries principle, and also through the management, through the principle of co-management, the artisanal fisheries sector and stakeholders are empowered to manage the resource. And eventually, the MPAs are going to graduate into territorial rights in fisheries, which would bring more wealth and better management of the resource at that level. We also incorporate this with canoe registration in the country. Nationwide, it is going on, and it enables us to keep a tab on the types of canoes, the number of fishermen, and whether or not they're engaging in activity that is consistent with respecting the fact that we do not allow illegal fishing. And with respect to the voluntary guidelines, we believe they provide empowerment and mobilization of the artisanal sector, the small-scale fisheries, and help to promote sustainability of the sector and the resources through good governance, and also with the involvement of civil society. There's an advocacy component, all of which I think add to the fact that they are complementing what we are doing as a people and as a government, and as such are contributing to the development of our country and the sustainability of the marine resources.
Le Sénégal est un pays qui est essentiellement caractérisé par la place qu'occupe sa pêche artisanale. En effet, si on prend les débarquements, la pêche artisanale assure autour de 80%. Également, pour ce qui concerne le nombre de personnes employées, nous estimons entre 600 000 et 1 million de personnes qui se tirent leur revenu directement ou indirectement donc, de cette pêche. Également, sur le plan contribution au niveau de notre balance économique, la pêche artisanale apporte près de 70% des devises donc, que la pêche génère. Il s'ajoute à cela également qu'en dehors des aspects économiques, la pêche artisanale est un mode de vie au Sénégal, parce que c'est une pêche pluriséculaire, pour ne pas dire millénaire, et dans laquelle se retrouvent les pêcheurs, tant pour ce qui concerne leurs revenus que sur ce qui concerne leur mode de vie. D'où donc l'importance de cette pêche. J'avais oublié de vous dire que malgré la place importante qu'occupe la pêche artisanale, elle est caractérisée par un état d'inorganisation. Parce que c'est une pêche qui est un secteur informel. Donc, pas organisé et par conséquent difficile à gérer. Donc, sous cet angle, nous pensons que les directives dont vous parlez tout à l'heure peuvent contribuer, premièrement, à nous permettre d'organiser ce secteur et deuxièmement, à permettre à ce que qu'on puisse mettre en place des instruments assez rationnels pour gérer ce secteur qui est encore stratégique au niveau du Sénégal. Il s'ajoute à cela aussi que, certainement, on a dû vous le dire, au niveau de la sous-région, la pêche artisanale sénégalaise est très présente. D'ailleurs, c'est ce qui explique que récemment, au niveau de la commission sous-régionale des pêches, nous avons conclu une convention appelée Convention sur les conditions minimales d'accès de la pêche. Et au sein de cette convention, la pêche artisanale occupe une très grande place et nous osons espérer que cette convention combinée avec les directives donc, va permettre au Sénégal de pouvoir avoir une meilleure gestion de cette pêche qui est d'importance pour le pays.
Muito obrigado por esta oportunidade que nós temos de falar sobre a pesca artesanal em Moçambique, que é um subsetor importante para a segurança alimentar, para a geração de emprego, igualmente para melhorar as condições de vida das comunidades pesqueiras. Este subsetor tem estado a contribuir com a produção muito relevante. Estamos a falar de cerca de 80% da produção pesqueira do país, o que significa que grande parte da população tem se beneficiado dos resultados desse subsetor da pesca artesanal para a sua dieta diária. Também percebemos que o governo tem colocado este subsetor, dando-lhe, atribuindo-lhe a devida importância, no sentido de que continua a contribuir para mais de 300 mil pessoas que estão envolvidas na prática da atividade pesqueira ou aproveitando-se dos resultados da atividade da pesca artesanal. Esses instrumentos que foram produzidos com a assistência da FAO, que neste momento são, de uma forma geral, considerados relevantes para o desenvolvimento da atividade pesqueira, em particular da pesca artesanal, esperemos que assegurem que os pescadores artesanais, através da sua produção, possam efetivamente ter melhores ganhos. Significa conseguirem aumentar a produção, ao mesmo tempo que estão preocupados ou estamos preocupados na sustentabilidade. Isto também permite que a própria atividade de pesca continue a desempenhar um papel muito importante na geração de rendimento para as futuras gerações. tem uma parte que tem a ver com o desenvolvimento social. O nosso entendimento é que estes instrumentos que foram produzidos vão permitir efetivamente que a contribuição da pesca artesanal em cada família do pescador seja efetiva. Significa, com os rendimentos da pesca, ele possa melhorar o nível de vida, ele possa melhorar as condições, ele possa contribuir para a segurança alimentar e, ao mesmo tempo, que está preocupado em assegurar que na sua comunidade todos possam ter um ambiente favorável para a sobrevivência. Igualmente, tem um outro instrumento que tem a ver com o emprego. Este instrumento vai permitir que a pesca seja uma atividade viável, para que muitas pessoas que vivem nas comunidades pesqueiras considerem como um emprego igual aos outros empregos, que considerem que a pesca é relevante porque ela assegura efetivamente os rendimentos, assegura com que o pescador possa garantir a educação para o seu filho, possa garantir a sua participação ativa na sociedade, possa garantir que a sua voz seja ouvida, uma vez que também tem contribuído bastante na economia do país. O outro assunto tem a ver com a redução de perdas pós-capturas, e igualmente a cadeia de valor dos produtos pesqueiros. Com esses instrumentos, esperamos que, efetivamente, o pescado seja aproveitado através de processamento adequado, manuseamento, desde o local da produção até o local do consumo. Esperamos também que haja, efetivamente, uma participação ativa de todos os atores no sentido de garantir infraestruturas de apoio à pesca, vias de acesso que ligam os centros de pesca e os mercados, garantir com que haja infraestruturas de processamento de pescado, produção de gelo e também de comercialização, portanto, mercados. E sobre o gênero, nós pensamos que a atividade pesqueira, na pesca artesanal, vai contribuir significativamente para o empoderamento da mulher, o que quer dizer, ela terá a oportunidade de participar como também gestora e dona de uma unidade de pesca, empregando pessoas, como alguém que pode contribuir efetivamente na sua família com os rendimentos da pesca. Igualmente, esperamos que as mulheres possam efetivamente aproveitar das oportunidades de investimento através de iniciativas de crédito e poupança rotativo, ou beneficiando-se de outros investimentos através de instituições de microfinanças. Finalmente, tem um assunto ligado a desastres e também mudanças climáticas. Estes instrumentos vão permitir que asseguremos efetivamente o direito do pescador, significa aquilo que tem contribuído para o seu rendimento, que tem contribuído para a melhoria de vida, seja preservado. O que quer dizer, em caso de desastre ou mudança de zona ou de local, se assegure alternativas para que os pescadores artesanais continuem também a se beneficiar da atividade de pesca ou de outras atividades relevantes, da mesma forma que consigam manter o nível de vida melhor na sua família. Por fim, dizer que todo o trabalho que está a ser feito com a nossa participação, tivemos a oportunidade de receber o subcomitê da pesca artesanal em Moçambique em 2010. Nós, como país, como setor das pescas e em particular subsetor das pescas, da pesca artesanal neste caso, identificamos-nos com os instrumentos que estão a ser produzidos e discutidos de uma forma harmoniosa.
South Africa has recognized the importance of small-scale fisheries as a potential contributor to the economy, especially at local level. In your inland and coastal rural communities, because it has huge potential to address socio-economic challenges and provide livelihood options and opportunities for people living in those communities. South Africa has accepted that large-scale commercial fisheries is well established in the country. Hence, it has provided required jobs and is a significant contributor to our GDP. But due to the past policies and practices, there's been lack of access and participation by the marginalized communities in coastal areas of the country. So it is against this background that in South Africa, the economic development policies are trying to address issues of broadening access and participation by these communities. To this end, we have developed a small-scale fisheries policy to address these challenges. Now, this policy takes a pro-poor approach in ensuring that socioeconomic challenges that are facing your inland and coastal rural communities are addressed. Well, regarding the international guidelines for small-scale fisheries, we, South Africa, at the 29th session of COFI, we supported the development of this international instrument, as it will help raise the importance of small-scale fisheries across the globe. But more important is it will also assist in setting agenda for different countries to adopt in terms of developing policies and national instruments and legislative frameworks that will help address the challenges facing small-scale fisheries in different parts of the world. Now, in the case of South Africa, which has already developed a small-scale fisheries policy, what is left of us is to develop an implementation plan for this policy going forward. The process of developing the international guidelines will help us further refine the interventions that we have under the policy and its implementation guidelines, but also improve our interventions so that we address the key and critical aspects and issues that are facing small-scale fisheries. One can talk about issues that relate to implementation of Article 11 of the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, which talks about how do we minimize post-harvest losses, especially from catches that come from small-scale fishermen, in ensuring that they create better economic opportunities, in ensuring that there's access to markets, in ensuring that things like value addition, product development are introduced as economic activities to sustain the livelihoods of rural coastal communities. It could go beyond that in ensuring that better support is afforded to these communities in terms of capacity building, access to credit, access to finance, most importantly, access to infrastructure. So these guidelines are very important, and we believe that such guidelines will influence further commitments from different states to at least afford small-scale fisheries and its opportunities in ensuring that they can drive development in the rural and coastal communities of our different countries.
Thailand is one of the leading nations in fishery, and fishery sector contribute to country economy. Fish production in the past decade is about 4 million tons a year, which value of 10 billion US dollar. Small-scale fishery play important role in poverty alleviation, income generation, employment, and food security as a protein source in local community. Fishery community in Thailand have about 60,000 households, and 80% of Thai fishermen are small-scale, considered as artisanal and low income. We set up the demonstration fishermen groups to improve fishery community in their area. And now we have more than 100 groups concerning self-reliance, strengthening on fishery resources management and conservation. Fishers, networking, self-coast guard, fishing, and community fish market. Thailand Department of Fisheries developed the 10-year master plan on marine fishery management, and now it's the 4th year of the plan. This plan is to serving as a key guideline for strengthening marine fishery sector, especially small-scale fishery, for economic development in local community and social well-being, as well as sustainable fishery resources, which in line with international guidelines initiated by FAO, and Thailand appreciate and fully support the principle of international guideline for small-scale fishery. This guideline could bring the empowerment and strengthening to small-scale fishery community, fishermen participation on decision-making, and local fishery resources management. Also, international guidelines help as the practical guidance for policy and strategy implementation, which bring us to securing sustainable fishery resources in Thailand.
My name is PONIA, and I'm from the Cook Islands. Now, the Cook Islands is a small island developing state in the Pacific region. So naturally, small-scale fisheries is very important to us. It provides sustenance, livelihoods, but small-scale fisheries is also the backbone to a lot of our traditional knowledge and cultural heritage. So it's very important to my area, and I believe more broadly to us as a global community. Small-scale fisheries is evolving. It's a complex sector. It involves reef fishes, artisanal fishes, game fishes, even the commercial operators themselves operating at small scales. So we're finding this quite a challenging sector. It's important to manage the sector because there are conflicting interests, economic, conservation, even different fishing practices. It's a very challenging area. It's very important. And we wish to put more emphasis in terms of small-scale fisheries development. We hope to draw upon a lot of the effort that's gone into industrial fishing and perhaps redress some of that balance and recognition of the importance of small-scale fishes. I believe FAO has a very important role to play in terms of small-scale fisheries. FAO is probably one of the organizations best placed to deal with this diverse sector. It's very close to the development aspects of small-scale fisheries. It's been working in this arena for a long time. A lot of the support we have, as I mentioned, concerns the industrial sector. So we have a lot of regional bodies involved in the management, involved in the science of industrial fisheries. And yet we must turn more often to FAO when it comes to small-scale fisheries. Therefore, the guidelines that FAO are preparing will be very important, not only for us, as I said, as a nation, but perhaps for the global community. I would encourage FAO, through its guidelines, to think about how we can get better data to manage the fishery, and for the guidelines to think about how we can deliver on funding mechanisms to associations that will empower the small-scale fishers at the grassroots level.
For Brazil, the small-scale fisheries is an extremely important sector, not only because it accounts for the majority of the seafood production in the country, but because it's huge socioeconomic importance. And we have over 1 million artisanal fishermen and the small-scale fisheries is crucial for food production, for poverty alleviation, for its cultural heritage, and so there are so many aspects that we could highlight on how the small-scale fisheries are important, that the only question I believe it would be really pertinent is what took us so long to put small-scale fisheries in the top of the agenda as our first priority, and that applies not only nationally in the case of Brazil, but also regionally and internationally. So we greatly welcomed and we strongly supported the recent initiatives taken by FAO towards the preparation of the international guidelines on small-scale fisheries, because in the end we have to keep in mind that when we talk about small-scale fisheries, is much more about people and fishermen and fisherwomen than about economic benefits. Well, the guidelines are a crucial instrument because they will become a very important tool to leverage the small-scale fisheries in the agendas, and they will be useful to raise small-scale fisheries not only national and regional agendas but also internationally. As I said, I think the only bad thing about these guidelines is that it's coming maybe too late. We should have done them much earlier before because of its importance, and I'm quite convinced that particularly the way they are being built with a very strong participation with civil society, which is in this case crucial, I am sure that these guidelines will become an extremely important tool to help to put small-scale fisheries in the top of the agenda and to make all leaders at national, regional, and international level understand the huge socioeconomic significance of this fisheries sector.